I was sitting in a dimly lighted room in what appeared to be a dentist chair. Before beginning, the doctor strapped me in and gave me some advice. Now, Jack, it's important to keep your eyes closed once the session begins. Is it really necessary to strap me in like this? I got a harsh look from the doctor. Jack, you signed the waiver. You are aware that you are being restrained for your own protection. Once the disintegration of the brain begins, anything can happen. You must follow all test conditions in order to receive money. I tried to nod in agreement, but I couldn't because of the leather strap around my head. All right, doctor, when you're prepared. I must admit that I was a little anxious. When I filled out the application form, the advertisement appeared to be innocent enough. $2,500 for a past life regression study, plus an additional $2,500 if any of the memories I gathered were valuable. It was hailed as a fantastic chance to remember one's past lives. I wasn't so sure now that I was here. I think the doctor recognized my nervousness. He put a comforting hand on my shoulder. Slow down, Jack. This will be an incredible experience, I promise. If it works, you mean? Yes, Jack, it will. More than 1,000 people applied. You are among the few individuals who are particularly qualified for this study, based on the survey responses you selected. Mental fortitude is crucial. As though it were consoling, he stated that the hundreds of ways it could all go wrong were all I could think about. For a day's labor, $5,000 wasn't bad, but if I went into a coma, I wouldn't be able to spend it. It would hardly scratch the surface of the ensuing medical expenditures at that point. All right, Jack, hold on tight. The doctor disappeared, only to return at the control center through a window in the room's corner. A speaker suspended from the ceiling echoed his voice. Jack, it's just like we discussed. 2 wires hung down from the ceiling and hung at my nostrils. We will be able to reach particular areas of your brain thanks to these cables that will enter your nasal cavity. You will then receive a succession of little electric shocks. As a reminder, each shock will cause an intense jolt in your head, but there won't be any long-term harm. My anxiousness increased with each word he spoke. I didn't know how this would affect my physique. I yelled, "Wait," as the cables started to ascend my passages. Yes, something wrong? Doctor, what's our safe word? Safe word? He inquired, seemingly perplexed. You know, if something goes wrong and I need to stop? He was silent for a moment before continuing. I apologize, Jack. No safe words. The documents were signed by you. At this point, the test cannot be stopped. I guarantee that you will emerge from this situation unscathed. I could hear my heart thumping loudly in my chest now. It was an eerie symphony that reflected my thoughts of regret and dread, especially when combined with the sneaky sound of medical equipment. The ideal background noise to maintain my terror. Then there was a severing pinch. The cords were all the way to the base of my skull. My leather binding made me writhe. Are you ready? Here we go. The first jolt was given to me without even a second's warning. You may be able to imagine what it feels like if you have ever been electrocuted. The sole distinction is that the energy is focused in one place, intensified there, causing excruciating pain that persists long after the current has passed. And again. Even worse was the second shock. Despite my agonized screams, the doctor remained focused. Again. Each shock became more excruciating than the one before it. No matter how much money they promised, I would never have signed up if I had understood how it would feel. Again. I asked the doctor to stop, but he refused. I can't recall how many times he stunned me. Somewhere after 12, I lost count. He eventually stopped, but it was unrelated to my tantrums or the moral conundrum the experiment presented. They're amazing readouts. Jack, your brain activity is exploding. It's this: your subconscious has been awakened by us. You're going to drown. I experienced a surge of enthusiasm before I could respond to what he had said. Then, one more, and one more. It was a strong yet calming experience, a nice diversion from the pounding my brain had just received. Doctor, I think, more than the straps could ever do, a last surge of energy, stronger than the others, interrupted and held me in place. My eyes quickly glazed over and rolled back into my skull, and I was unable to move or talk. Then it got dark. Jack, can you hear me? Although I couldn't see the doctor, I could hear his voice. There was nothing but darkness around. Listen, Jack, if you can hear me, I need you to open your eyes. When I followed the instructions, I was shocked to see a long, narrow hallway with numerous doors on either side. Doctor, what's going on? Jack, you'll need to speak up. Even if your lips are moving, your voice is hardly audible. I said, what's going on? It's better that way. We succeeded, Jack. You are currently in a subconscious representation. I had a lot of doubts about it. My subconscious? Really? Yes, Jack. Actually, here in the room, your body is still strapped down. We were able to access this area of your mind with the aid of electroshock therapy. Latent memories from your previous lifetimes should now be accessible to us. What do you observe? Tell me. It's just a hallway of doors. Well, that's good. Everybody sees it differently. Some see it as a vast home, while others see it as an ocean with countless ports and lighthouses. It looks like yours is easier to get to. You should be able to catch a glimpse of a previous recollection when you open a door. I observed my entire body, including my legs, when I looked down. Even if it wasn't my actual body, it felt nice to be able to move about once more. Just open a door then, is there anything to be concerned about? No, Jack. Here, nothing can harm you. Your recollection should start playing like a movie when you open the door. Nobody will be aware of your presence. This is merely a projection. All right, here goes nothing. Approaching the closest door, I turned the knob. It refused to turn. Doctor, it's locked. I am unable to enter. Jack, these are your memories, your doors. You are the only one locking them. The secret to opening them is your determination. Try again, but give in this time. Be open to the possibility of it all. Remind yourself. I inhaled deeply and gave it another go, this time without any inhibitions. After clearing my head, I turned the knob. It worked this time. I managed to open the door with a shove. Doctor, it worked. The door is open. Jack, that is fantastic. What do you see? A gloomy abyss was reached by a flight of stairs. Just a stairway. Shall I enter? Yes, see where it takes you. In an attempt to control my fears, I moved carefully downhill, inhaling deeply with each step. Accessing my inner consciousness was thrilling, but I had no idea what I would discover there. In an other existence, what if I didn't like who I was or what I saw? What if the facts I discovered were too much for me to handle? I ventured down the last step and entered a person's house. It appears to be a charming cabin from the 19th or early 20th century. It featured exquisite furnishings, a lovely cobblestone fireplace, and an elderly man seated in an armchair, holding a book in one hand and a pipe in the other. I pondered whether that was a previous incarnation of myself. Hi, doctor. I'm in a cabin, most likely in the 1800s or so. A man is sitting by the fireside, reading. Is that me? The physician didn't answer. Doctor? He didn't respond, but there was more stillness. I can't hear you. The old man was staring up at me when I turned to face the source of the speaker. He couldn't have done it, could he? No one could see me, the doctor stated. Can't hear you, I said, not from inside. The elderly man was the one. He put down his book and got up to look at me, startled, and my heart skipped a beat. This is only a recollection. How are you able to see me? Really, it's easy. You are me, or a portion of you at the very least. He could tell that I was confused. You know, evolution is a curious thing. Qualities that have been passed down from one generation to the next in an effort to improve and secure us. As they say, survival of the fittest. What do you mean? I inquired, not understanding his meaning. Reincarnation is a true phenomenon. I'm the area of your brain responsible for storing previous regressions. Without me, the memories of all your previous lifetimes would flood your mind from birth. Suddenly, all those memories came gushing in. Your brain would never be able to cope with the sensory bombardment it would be. I provide defense against that. He was saying something that was incredible. I was participating in a paid medical study just a moment ago, and now I was suddenly discovering the universe's mysteries inside my own head. There was plenty to process. May I sit? I said. Obviously, Jack, come visit me. Before answering, I took a seat in the armchair and gathered my thoughts. So why can't the doctor hear me right now? I've taken use of this recollection to talk to you. I've temporarily turned off your physical body's speech and hearing because I can access other parts of your brain. But why? Why did you feel the need to talk to me so strongly, and in private at that? He purposefully made eye contact as he leaned in and grasped my shoulders. He relaxed his hold and stepped back. You mean to stop remembering? What? Why? What's going to happen? I inquired. There is nothing hazardous. The floodgates are still locked. One prior life at a time, this brief journey down memory lane wouldn't have any significant effects on its own. However, I will not permit it. Well, won't let it? Why not? Others will do the same if the doctor's experiment is successful. How many people will go this route and have this kind of experience with their pasts is impossible to predict. It will eventually upset the equilibrium of evolution. Humans might very possibly be born without me after years of this carelessness, with their memories entirely unharmed. In other words, shortly after leaving the womb, they will die or go into a coma. He approached and seized me once more. I shall strike back if you carry on with this little adventure of yours. I'll have them all, one memory after another, until you are left with nothing. You will spend the remainder of your life in a vegetative condition. Dissatisfied with the tone he was adopting, I shoved him away. What on earth are you discussing? I am you. Both of us will perish. He laughed at my response. Like all of your inherent characteristics, I am a product of evolution. My first responsibility is to the species, followed by my own survival. I'll go to whatever lengths to fulfill my obligations. I didn't want to disturb the natural order of things, but I also didn't want to be threatened. To be honest, I didn't want to be in my own thoughts in the first place. As soon as possible, I would like to leave. All right, I'll quit. Good. The memory returned to its regular condition, as if a pause button had been pressed, and the guy sat down again in his chair. I closed the door behind me as I landed back in the hallway after walking up the way I had come. Are you there, Jack? What's going on? We were able to talk again when the doctor's voice came back. I explained the situation to him. He sighed deeply, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. I was scared it would come to this. Doctor, what are you talking about? You were aware of this? He let out another sigh before answering. It occurred in every test I had taken before. Our bodies have developed a safeguard against memories of prior lives. Previous examinations before me, there were others. Yes, and they all had the same conclusion. At the end of the sessions, all test subjects were put into a coma. One man passed away soon after. Slumbering? Has someone passed away? Nothing you said in here could harm me. I needed your attention. Let's keep our attention on the issue at hand for the time being, but we can argue about this until the cows come home. How about we open another door? My blood was boiling by this time. An additional door? One more door? Are you serious? Get me out of here. I don't intend to become just another one of your failures. Jack, you signed the documents. Until we get this done, I won't wake you. I need additional details. My job is at stake. I'll drag you out in just 2 more doors. What are your thoughts? Your career doesn't matter to me. I won't go on. I'll finally wake up by myself. The physician chuckled a little. No, Jack, you won't. You're in the depths of your own thoughts. Another electric jolt that is precisely calibrated is the only thing that will wake you up. I won't wake you if you stop, and you'll be unconscious anyhow. You mean I can speak? As if we were speaking at this very moment? After I tell someone they can... The physician interrupted. I just need to flip a switch to turn that off. You won't be able to talk to anyone. Now I was boiling with rage. Doctor, you're a sick man, an extremely ill man. I apologize, Jack. I must do this. It is for the benefit of humanity. The world might change as a result of this research. I stand on the brink of something significant, something that would change your life. I used some profanity on him, but he didn't respond. Jack, simply follow instructions. Don't even consider lying. I'll be able to spot any dishonesty because I can see your brainwaves. For a long time, I sat in the corridor of my memories, thinking about what I could do. I soon discovered that I only had one available to me. My best option was to keep going. There were just 2 doors. Perhaps I could enter and exit undetected and put an end to this nightmare for good. All right, doctor, I'll carry it out. All right, go down the hall a little before opening another door. I'm looking for something more profound. Unwillingly, I followed directions and opened a door farther down the hallway. These stairs led up, but there was another set. Doctor, it's another staircase I'm entering. Determined to see all I could and get out of there as soon as possible, I walked up the steps. Arjek, what's inside? I was in a different home's living room. It belongs to someone, presumably mine. Continue to scan your surroundings. Try to pinpoint your exact location. As I moved around the space, I noticed a framed picture on the wall. It featured a guy, a lady, and a young girl. He resembled me exactly. This is a picture of a family doctor. It includes me. The man is exactly like me. Although it's uncommon, it can occur. Continue to look around. I was shocked by how contemporary everything appeared as I moved through the house. Not until I spotted a newspaper in the dining room did I realize anything was wrong and start to get worried. The date on the paper was today. Something's wrong here, doctor. The past is not here. This newspaper has the current date on it. Really? Are you positive? Yes, I am. The past is not here. Wow. In the end, my theories were correct. Conjectures? Would you mind giving me a hint? Jack, you are correct. This isn't a reminiscence from a previous life. It happens in real time from a current life and is stored in an ongoing memory. Life right now, not paying attention. I've always thought that there are parallel other worlds out there, countless distinct universes, some of which are comparable to our own. We have a counterpart in each of them. Another version of ourselves, but with a different life. Jack, this isn't a memory from a previous life. It's a present tense recollection from a different Jack in a different period. Isn't it fascinating? The family from the photo came home at that very moment, and they entered the dining room where I was standing as the front door opened. The wife, what must have been their daughter, and the other me. Seeing it was a weird experience. Doctor, they are here, he and his family and me. That's fantastic. Watch and see what you discover. I turned to look at the living room stairs. I should have departed immediately to avoid any repercussions, but something prevented me from doing so. At the time, I believed that my curiosity was the only thing holding me in place. I'll confess that I was interested in learning more about the history of my book, but it wasn't the reason I stayed. I sensed it as the memories came to me. There was a warm energy coming from inside. There was a link. Although I knew nothing about this other Jack's life, I was able to sense his emotions, his affection for this family. I couldn't force myself to distance myself from that emotional connection. I saw every moment of the recollection as it unfolded. I now knew that our daughter's name was Leslie and my wife's name was Charlotte. Together, we spent the day watching movies, playing games, and eating dinner. A selection of strange films that probably didn't exist in my own world. I was no longer upset with the doctor and told him about everything as it happened. I should have been, but I was overcome by this overwhelming warmth. I had the impression that I was the one interacting with my family. If there was ever such a day, it was absolutely ideal. However, as is so frequently the case in life, good things do not last. I had been living in that memory all day without even noticing it. Everyone soon went to bed, and I found myself downstairs, alone myself, with only a glimmer of moonlight peeking through the windows. It was time to go, but I didn't want to. I turned around and gave the home one more glance before heading off to the stairs. As weird as it may sound, I knew right then and there that I would miss them. Something was obviously wrong as I absorbed the scene. A man, or at least the outline of one, stood in the living room's corner. His other features were a mystery because he was obscured by darkness, except for the dim red glow of his eyes. He made eye contact and spoke. The cadence seemed too familiar. "You're not supposed to be here." I was afraid of this part of my brain, no longer assuming the persona of a harmless elderly man, yet I found the strength to respond with a statement. This location, this recollection, it's not a previous life. It's a completely different universe. You made no mention of that. "Jack, I told you to stop. I must now take away from you something you were never supposed to witness." A moment later, I was outside the house, gazing up at it from the street. Now it was burning, a hole searing into the night sky. My wife and daughter both screamed for assistance against the glass of their bedroom windows, and I watched in terror. The awful vision behind him was obscured by the red-eyed shadow that materialized in front of me. I called out for assistance myself. "Dr. Covenwood, he's returned! He's returned!" How many times must I tell you this? He is unable to hear you. How? How is this possible? Every version of you is linked. You all draw from the same brain, which is divided by your own self. I had him light a fire after tapping into this one. Oh, how could you? I didn't lie to you, but I also didn't tell you everything. You're not supposed to have this level of authority. Everything will be destroyed, not just evolution, but also the harmony of worlds. In an instant, he was running at me and clutching my neck till it was nearly impossible for me to breathe. "I will not repeat this to you again. I'll burn it all down if you don't stop." The memories vanished suddenly, and I was able to breathe once more. I was back at the open door in the hall. "How are you doing, Jack? What's happening right now?" I told the doctor everything again. He appeared less worried and more interested. "Oh, all right, Jack. You're free after one more door." "Doctor, he'll murder me. Get me out now." "I can't, Jack. I don't know anything new. I have arrived at this place numerous times previously." "Are you serious?" "You're still here, which is fantastic news. After seeing their other timelines, every other subject went into a coma." "So you were aware of my intentions. Was your astonishment at your hypothese's eventual validation only a show? Are you hiding anything else from me?" Once more there was little response to the profanity that escaped my lips. It was better the less you knew. Since we are so close, I cannot allow you to go crazy. Hesitancy is not an option. So focus, Jack, please. Your hallway doesn't go on forever. A finish line, if you will, is always the last point. Every memory you've had has made your mind more resilient. You'll need it to open the last door. Knowing that if I wanted a way out, I would have to make fun of him, I sighed. Final door, you say? Yes. Unlike the others, there ought to be one at the end of the hall in your situation. You would have been out of a chance if we had opened it right away. It has happened to past subjects more than a few times. However, it is now hoped that you will be able to cross the finish line, so to speak, without having to sacrifice your mental infrastructure. Doctor, no, take me away. I'm finished. It's finished. Please. He wasn't even put off by what I said. Furthermore, we must approach this with intelligence. There will be the area of your brain that is causing chaos. Throwing him off the path is necessary. As many doors as you can should be opened. Go in, dash through, and come out the other door. You ought to emerge back in the hallway if my theories are right. Rinse and repeat. No. Jack, I'll leave you in there. I mean it. Now that I'm being honest with you, you'll comply. I have come as far as I can, and this is all I know. I'll wake you up if you do this for me. You have my word. Even though I was furious, there was nothing I could do about it. If I had any hope of escaping this and being able to lead a normal life, I would have to comply with his wishes. All right, that's the last door. No more games. You have my word, Jack. I took a moment to prepare myself, and then I started opening as many doors as I could to confuse the hound and divert its attention. Even though I didn't have as much time as I used to savor every experience, I still witnessed some odd sights. I was in a motel in one universe, clinging to an odd set of norms. In another, I was in a dense forest, hunting down a magical being. In a different one, I was searching through NASA's records to find out about their covert initiatives. There were too many to mention, innumerable others. Never far behind was my memory devil. He torched everything in his trail as I fled, terrified for my life. Fortunately, I lost him in time. My last memory was followed by the doctor's voice. Jack, that ought to be sufficient. Run to the end of the hall as soon as possible. I tried, but it didn't work. The cycle went on and on. I ended up back at the door where I had begun. I can tell since the same memory was still playing inside of it. It's not working, Doctor. I'm circling around here. Jack, it's the same as before. The secret is your will. The last door will show up if you allow it to enter your thoughts. All right. Jack, you need to open your mind. It's this. If you do this, you will be free. With greater purpose, I ran once more. I was relieved when the hall ended this time. As the doctor had described, there was a door at its end point that was entirely different from the others that had come before it. It's blood red and has a handle rather than a knob. Doctor, I'm here. I located it. Stop wasting time now. Open it. I was stopped in my tracks by a booming voice that spiraled down the hallway. When I turned back, I saw the red-eyed shadow, a fire blazing nearby, destroying every door and my memories of them. You're going to ruin everything. He was putting a stop to it. The point of no return was this. I reasoned that I might as well figure out the secret before I passed away if I was going to die or be in a coma. Cease, I'm pleading with you. I pulled the doorknob, walked inside, and closed the door before my adversary could get close. My eyes raced around and checked my surroundings once I was certain it was securely closed. I was surprised to see that it was just a regular room with a desk, a few chairs, and a computer. It reminded me of an office. A human was seated at the desk, and not just anyone. It reminded me of myself. "Hello, Jack." He got up and approached me. I stepped back. Who are you?" "Didn't you meet my brother? That person out there having a tantrum?" Behind me, he pointed to the door. We're just two sides of the same coin. The human coding differs. A decision that is made at the moment of birth, two evolutionary components vying for dominance. There is one of him and one of me for everyone. He approached me with one of the seats. "Please, sit." Uncertain of what I was dealing with here, I sat down slowly. "You see, Jack, my brother has prevailed in every conflict thus far. Every human being is born with his coding encoded into their DNA, making the actual function of the brain just out of reach. Among other things, your old memories would remain intact if people evolved with me instead, but safety comes before innovation. Putting too much strain on the mind might be harmful. I concur with that. However, lately, I've been changing. I suppose the same is true for the parts of me that are in other individuals." Asking, transforming how? There is more to evolution than meets the eye. There is a lot of trial and error involved. Since I'm stuck here, I've only had time to work on my integration. Now, I think that if I'm carried on in the genetic pool, people will, in a sense, become me. Gradually, your entire brain will develop, and your previous memories will come back, piece by piece. Everyone benefits. Curious now, I questioned, "What do you mean by abilities and full function exactly?" "Well, have a look, Jack. This is the control center of your brain, where all of the magic takes place." I took another look around. It was difficult to accept that my brain was controlled in such a limited area. "A computer equipped to office? Really?" "Jack, every brain interprets things differently. This is simply how you perceive things." "All right, and how is evolution related to this?" "My sibling inhibits both higher brain function and memory. Do you recall what he said? Every version of you that exists is controlled by a single brain." Inquiring, "How did you know that?" "I've been listening in. There is nothing else to do inside." "All right, continue." "He wasn't lying, though. You also acquire the cunning skill known as transference if his dam bursts, and you are granted access to all of your memories. Chronology to chronology, Jack to Jack, you can hop between them. Furthermore, it doesn't end there. Additionally, you have the option to jump to any point in any timeline. Would you like to experience your first kiss, start again, make alternative choices? Or reorganize your life? You can with me. It's the closest thing to immortality that mankind will ever get." There had to be a drawback, even though the pitch was strong. "What's the catch?" He gave me a long look, as though he was debating whether or not to tell me more. Then he went on. "When evolving, kinks are inevitable. As I've stated, trial and error. From here, I can only do so much. I might be inherited as a trait by subsequent generations if you can unlock me in your own thoughts." Too important to be allowed to form in the latest evolution. If you can unlock me in your own thoughts, I'll have a shot if you and the doctor continue his studies with others. As I have stated, trial and error, as opposed to inherited traits with others. I might be inherited, as a trait, by subsequent generations if you can find which bears most fruit. I had my doubts, but everything was starting to make sense. And while you hone your craft, will people be hurt along the way? He scowled, and it really did appear sincere. Yes, there will be victims. It's for the greater good, though. I promise that with me at their side, humanity will thrive. He moved me over behind the desk, placed me down in front of the computer, and gently lifted me out of my chair. There was only one window open on a black screen. This is something I could never figure out. Actually, only you are able to. After all, it's your mind. You must utilize your will, just like the doors in the hallway. Will be free if you have an open mind and enter the password. His words caused the door to fly open, allowing the red-eyed shadow to rush in. No, Jack, don't do it. It won't work out. This is not what the human race was designed for. His much nicer half added something. Jack, don't listen to him. A completely new age will begin, and you will be the reason for it. A world in which the impossible is feasible. I sat there staring at the TV with a great deal of weight on my shoulders as the decision loomed overhead, while the shadow strode over and seized his brother, throwing him against the wall as the fire entered the room. The shadow held him by the neck against a flaming wall while the nicer brother shouted at me. Jack, you can stop him when you unlock the rest of your brain. You can shut him off. He was obviously running out of time. The red eyes would not stop. Any moment in any time frame, you can cut him off. I had a fleeting moment of reflection as the words echoed in my ears. As the options became apparent, I was able to concentrate better. I was aware of my obligations. The room was now filled with fire. I pressed the Enter key after typing the first thing that sprung to mind in the password field. My body vanished into an unending abyss while the surroundings turned black. I was collapsing. No, is it too late? He hurried to loosen the leather straps and take out the cables as soon as I sprang to life in the doctor's office. Where were you, Jack? In there, lost you. What did you observe? What did the last chamber contain? I turned my fist around and struck the side of his face as soon as he unbuckled the final strap. He threw his glasses all over the place. What the devil, Jack? You can forget it if you believe you will be compensated after this. Doctor, keep the money. I no longer require it. I never turned around after leaving that desolate room. This concludes the story of Jack. It was a simple 6-digit password that worked well. It was Leslie's birthday, and I'm not sure how I found out. I can now recall every detail of my life, both past and present. I'm going to flip a switch in my mind and join my wife and daughter in their timeline, prior to their deaths, as soon as I finish typing this. I'll permanently banish that phantom monster and ensure that he never harmed them again. And I intend to spend the remainder of my life there, no hopping from one planet to another or doing anything else with my newfound power. I simply need the universe in which my family resides. My parents took me and a few family from the room. I will never forget his shocked expression, which taught me that there is a terrible problem with being ill. My father's reaction made me cry, which taught me that there is a terrible problem with being ill. I am currently 28 years old, and for years of my life I was completely terrified of throwing up. Emetophobia governs many aspects of a person's life. It makes them fearful of sharing drinks, eating without washing their hands, riding roller coasters, flying in airplanes, and trying new things. However, after living with that phobia for decades, you eventually forget what makes you fearful of all those things. You stop even considering the risk of vomiting. It becomes subconscious. You simply fear almost everything that could trigger it, but you are unable to provide a clear explanation for your fear. You simply are. The imposter discovered that option, but it no longer hovers at the edge of my conscious mind. He saw what frightens me the most and went right to the heart of who I am. He pulled it out and threw it at me. Reciting Nathan's spiritual purge chant served as a reminder, as well as a means of incapacitating me in the field. It serves as a reminder of the creature's extraordinary ability to turn my own frail humanity against me. It served as a reminder that it intended to cause me the most intimate suffering. The imposter was almost prepared to pull me into the hell he was creating for me. The world then fell apart on me, knowing that my fiancé was sleeping and unprotected in bed, while a monstrous creature marched toward her through the darkness. I lay on the ground and puked my guts out. In all the voices she knew, it called her name. It made her joyful with its words. It imitated children's cries and pleaded for assistance. It took advantage of her repressed memories, her natural maternal instincts, and the fragility of her unconscious state. I had no choice but to stutter around and wait for my death-gripped heart's throb to stop. Moonlight eventually returned to my field of vision, illuminating the path out of the park. My limbs became less numb, and my pulse calmed down from its frenzied state. For once, I was not paralyzed by the flavor in my tongue. To return to my home, I ran through the streets. I wasn't planning. The houses that lined my street had many lights on. I think a lot of my neighbors had heard me yelling. I thought this would make the imposter reconsider going out in the open, under their watchful eyes. It was completely dark inside my house, and the front door was ajar. I yelled for Faye, but she was nowhere to be seen. The bed was unkempt and empty, as if she had been pulled or leapt out of it. I heard a faint sound, the sound of crying, and I had trouble figuring out where it was coming from. I searched every room before determining that it was coming from the outdoors. The sound became louder and was accompanied by shuffling sounds as I moved out of our bedroom through the sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. Faye was there, in the dark, on the walkway that goes along the side of our house, connecting the front and backyard. I had never seen her sleepwalking in such an odd way, as previously she was hunched over at the waist and stood tall on the balls of her feet. She shuffled toward the street where I had originally seen the shadowy figure, her arms and hair hanging lifelessly toward the ground. I could see Faye's face swaying just beyond her left thigh because of the way her neck was craned. Her lips quivered as she sobbed, and two sad eyes looked up at me from it. I was unable to determine whether she was conscious. She said something, but I was unable to understand her because of her sobs. She clawed at me and threw a tiger palm at my crotch when I put my arms around her waist and literally dragged her inside. A police cruiser passed by with its flashlights tracing all over the houses as we crashed into the living room. I looked out the window and carefully shut the door. It took me a time to see, but a dark figure was crouching on the thickest branch of the tree in our front yard. I pulled the blinds and curtains down. The rest of the night, until daybreak, Faye and I stayed up. There were no voices, but we could hear footsteps in the attic and on our roof. We stayed in the living room even though there were 2 soft knocks on the front door and 1 on the back sliding glass door. Pen and paper was our only means of communication, and neither of us allowed the other to fall asleep and dream about Christopher or the scrapbook. She scribbled, "I got an idea," as her final sentence. Describe tomorrow. My cell phone buzzed on the table at around 6 in the morning. After several hours of silence, Faye and I were nearly finished with the second Lord of the Rings film. I was shocked to see that the ranger from Pikes Peak was on the other end of the phone when I picked it up. His name is Greg, which is also Faye's father's name, so I only use his title in these entries. It has been a long time since we chatted. I thought right away that his call was a confirmation of Nathan's death, which seemed quite likely. He said, "You better sit down," eschewing politeness. The ranger tried to talk calmly and cleared his throat, but I could tell he had been crying because of the tone of his voice. We received a call from one of Nathan's family members, he said. Claimed to have been absent for a few days. No one knew where he was, but I assumed he went camping with his friends. I stopped by Faye's cabin this morning as part of my routine. I learned all I needed to know from the lengthy stillness that followed. The ranger continued, though, saying, "There are now police officers all throughout this area. The entire mountain is closed. T-Way is still on their missing persons list, but this time they're going all out to find a body, searching for a killer as well, but..." I cut him off and insisted on knowing why. I could no longer conceal my panicked nervousness. "Something happened up there," the ranger stated. "At the cottage, up. Something they did to him. I have no idea how to tell you." He hesitated once more, fighting back tears. As he spoke, I fell to the ground. Every nerve in my body was pricked by the news, and I felt pain radiating up from my gut to every limb. I had a tingly scalp. In my eyes, the static increased. I said, "I need to know." I pleaded with the ranger, who argued that the information weren't needed. The ranger's words are paraphrased in what I'm going to tell you. As the Denver coroner conducts an official autopsy, some of these information may change, but we currently know. When the ranger arrived, the front door was unlocked and slightly open, and the cabin's bathroom window had been wrenched open from the outside. From the inside, the bedroom door was locked. Nathan was among the two individuals who seemed to have spent 2 or 3 nights in the cabin. My number was the last one dialed on Nathan's satellite phone, which was discovered inside. When we last spoke, Nathan had promised not to go to the cabin, but it was unclear if he was actually there. In the passage from the living area to the bedroom, numerous odd words and symbols had been carved, and a buck knife was wedged into one of the walls. There were words in Zuni, a language they do not speak, and Hopi, the language Nathan's people speak. The translation of the words is still pending. The bedroom door had a big dream catcher carved on its exterior, and the carpet and lower wall across from it were splattered with non-lethal amounts of blood. There were tiny markings all over the inside of the bedroom door, as if someone had been beating on it with a very heavy hand. The sheriff and ranger surmised that Nathan spent hours, if not a day, sitting on the corridor floor. The bedroom door was still locked, but someone was inside. They might have talked for a long time. The cabin had been turned off after I was rescued on my second visit, so neither the heat nor the power ever worked. This implied that Nathan would spend every night in the dark in cold conditions, regardless of how long he stayed. 2 sets of footprints were discovered going out of the cabin and into the woodland behind it. One from the front entrance and the other from the bedroom window. The 2 individuals walked side by side into the woods, as evidenced by the tracks joining together. About a quarter of a mile in, the ranger's dogs discovered Nathan's body buried upside down, with his legs sticking out of the ground at the knee. Nathan's face and scalp were found to have been damaged or flayed upon exhumation. His arms had carvings that appeared to have been self-inflicted, while his back had significant cuts that might have been caused by claws, but he had been buried alive, and suffocation was the unofficial cause of death. Oh, and there was nothing left in the cellar. It was totally deserted. Never in my life have I been so close to taking my own life. I won't try to write out the ranger's words, since I still can't express the remorse and dread I felt. I somehow persuaded myself that I needed to concentrate on Faye at the moment, but that there would be time for mourning and even penance in the future. After all, if we don't come up with a solution, she might wind up exactly like Nathan and T-Way. Other than the occasional voice, there was no unusual activity for a few days. Faye would dream of her younger brother and give the imposter what it wanted, so I was afraid to let her sleep. For the first time in months, though, I felt a glimmer of hope as she told me about her idea. A strategy to finally get rid of the creature. After determining that Nathan's tea was not causing any noticeable harm, we continued to consume it, and Faye devoted the days to frantically sketching, journaling, and emailing her mother and sister. I gave the Shoshone woman, Angela, a call and asked her to come see us with her friend who is a hypnotist so they could talk to Faye once more and bless our new home. In order to assist in paying for Tiwi and Nathan's burial services, I also gave the community as much money as I could. I wrote a letter for them both in my free time in the evenings, and I hoped to read it at their grave someday. Faye cried every night before bed. After years of denial, she had undoubtedly begun the grieving process, and I now witnessed the lasting effects of her passing. I have never witnessed a person in such agony. Faye, however, reassured me that she would be well and that I should trust her. I silently complied as I had the utmost faith in her. Her self-awareness is something I trust. I went to Faye's room several times a day and went to her chair beside her bed one evening and took out Faye's drawings. She had produced multiple images of childhood recollections, her own nightmares, and a young man who resembled her. I think he is Christopher, or at least the way Faye thinks he would have appeared if he had lived to adulthood. She scribbled a variety of things surrounding the drawings, primarily in-depth explanations of the pictures and occasionally anecdotes from her early years. She also wrote her brother's name numerous times. She even sketched a photo of the family in which she was 5 years old and cuddling a happy infant. Angela and her friend, a hypnotist, showed up on the 5th night following the event in the park. I just don't want you to have to keep track of too many people, which is why I haven't provided the hypnotist's name. Faye told our visitors what she thought we could do to permanently eradicate the entity. The mysterious figure was last seen beneath the tree in our front yard, so I went outside and placed the sketches there. After that, we positioned Faye on the couch and made her comfortable. All we needed to do was turn down the lights in the house, because Faye has the amazing capacity to fall asleep anywhere at any time. She passed out in half an hour after I prepared pasta for everyone. She didn't sip Nathan's tea this time. I sat at the kitchen table with ice cream and coffee for a long time with the hypnotist, Angela. While we waited for the imposter to arrive, we spoke quietly and talked about everything that had happened in the cabin lately. The dream catchers particularly caught the hypnotist's attention, and he was curious as to their maker. I admitted to her that I had no idea, and that initially I believed they were made by the creature itself. After talking to you, no sleepers, you are wiser than I am, I began to think that the initial dream catcher was either used to summon or control the entity. I discovered it was protecting me when I broke it. Do you think it could have been made by one of her relatives? She said. Or the ranger? Do you think he's trustworthy? Many individuals have conjectured that Tiwi and Nathan were either dishonest or not who they claimed to be when they spoke with me. To be honest, though, I hadn't thought that the ranger himself might be responsible for everything. It was plausible, I admitted. In her sleep, Faye spoke a few times. Do you need help with that? What the hell are you doing? She asked, laughing. I knew she was having work dreams once she mentioned her boss's name. By the time we waited till almost midnight, nothing had happened and there were no outside noises. Angela responded, "We need to take a more direct approach," and roused Faye. The two women hummed a lovely melody while supporting Faye in a hospital bed position. The hypnotist occasionally raised her hands in the air before touching Faye's shoulders, while Angela spoke in her native tongue and made lines over Faye's forehead with her finger. My fiancée became limp a few minutes later. Her arm hung down to the floor, and her head sagged back on the couch. Her eyes, now rolled back in her head, opened at last, and she started breathing in a steady pattern. According to the hypnotist, "Who are you?" "Faye," she said simply. "Are you by yourself?" "I'm with you." Who else is present? Angela, Felix, her employer, Erica. Faye was corrected by the hypnotist. Erica isn't here, she said. There are just the four of us. After a moment of perplexity, Faye answered, All right. Angela caressed Faye's arm and entered the conversation. The one who follows you? She inquired. Someone who yells in the middle of the night? Now, where is he? Is he present? Faye said, No, as her head jerked back and forth as if she were removing water from her ears. Where is he? After sitting there for what seemed like an entire minute, Faye eventually spoke the words, across the dark. Then the hypnotist continued, Can you call out to him, Faye? Could you invite him here? She said nothing. Once more, the hypnotist inquired. No, Faye responded firmly. Honey, unless you bring him here, we can't get rid of him, Angela said. Faye started whining. Her mouth quivered, and she said, Please, no, in a childlike voice. I was sitting at the table watching, and I had goosebumps all over my arms. Faye started crying as Angela begged. Must be called, the hypnotist reiterated. Inform him of your location. Faye attempted to defend herself by reaching up into the air and swaying her head slowly back and forth, but she was held in place by the weight of her hypnotic state. Her eyes rolled forward and her body went rigid. When they landed directly on me, they turned to face something 1,000 miles behind me. Her throat made a gurgling sound as her mouth opened slightly. In a moist male voice, she murmured, Watch you. Watch you. With a shudder, as if she were attempting to throw something off her back, Faye jumped off the couch. She turned away from us, her body still rigid. Her limbs exploded with terrible cracks at every joint. She balled her hands tightly after bending her head back and gazing up at the intersection of the wall and ceiling in front of her. Watch you, watch you, watch you, she repeated. Now, Angela and the hypnotist stood, huddled around Faye to keep her from injuring herself or running away into the darkness. I tried to be prepared for everything by playing safety a few feet away. Tell us where he is, Faye, the hypnotist asked. She forced out the word bedroom after taking a deep breath through clenched teeth. We all turned to peer down the dim hallway behind us. The hypnotist began whispering in Faye's ear after placing a palm behind her forehead. I turned and walked stealthily toward the bedroom down the hall. I could hear the yard's sliding glass door opening as I got closer, its dull, the dim interior. A chilly wind was blowing into our bedroom when I entered. On the other wall, the glass door was ajar. After making sure I wasn't going to be attacked, I turned to face the door. When something moves, the motion sensor in the backyard light immediately turns on. The yard was dark and it was off, but I could see the outline of a man at the far end of the yard. It was the same person I had seen a week before and had made the grave error of pursuing. The figure was significantly bigger this time, perhaps standing at a height of about 7 feet. Its head was tilted toward the moon, and it was facing away as usual. Its fists, tightly gripping numerous pieces of paper, were pressed against its sides. Phase illustrations. Whoa, my! Whoa, my! It roared. I hurried back to the living room after locking the door and sliding it shut as quickly as I could. Angela and the hypnotist were talking to Faye, who was now seated on the couch, with her head still cocked toward the ceiling. They pleaded with her to wake up, but she appeared to be having difficulty getting back. A voice howled outside. It sounded like a young child pleading with her mom. "Greg, we need to take her to a hospital," screamed Laura, another voice. The two women gripped Faye tightly and pleaded with her to awake as she started to shudder. In the yard, an infant started to scream, and it gradually made its way to the front door by moving along the side of the house. A slow, loud knock came, and then more voices. Becca's voice yelled out from behind the door as the knock continued. "Faye? Where? Please help me." Finally, Faye took a deep breath and reclined on the sofa. She rose up, desperately attempting to gather herself, and her head returned to its natural position. The voices started to overlap, and the hammering on the door got louder, as if there were multiple persons standing in front of our house, yelling in the middle of the night. It's here," she exclaimed hurriedly as she turned to face me. I saw fear and uncertainty in Faye's eyes, which were reflections of how I was feeling. Then her face took on an expression of certainty. It appeared to instantly dispel the fear. A man outside the door started crying. It said, "He was also my child, Laura," in Greg's voice. "My son. Did you think I would forget after spending a weekend in the goddamn mountains?" Faye let out a gasp. I almost thought he was on the other side of the door since his statements were so obvious. "You fucking dare not," Laura's voice called out. "Simply let her to forget. Let her forget. She doesn't have to bear this weight as well." Faye sobbed and staggered to the door. Reaching for the knob, she pressed her face against it. A baby's screams filled the home, and then a little girl asked, "What's your name? I am unable to see you. Faye is here. Faye." In desperation, I saw my fiancé fall to the ground. Faye stopped the hypnotist and Angela from moving ahead by raising her hand in the air. Leaning her back against the door, she sat on the floor and combed her strawberry hair out of her face. Once more, the door knocked. It was followed by my own voice, which said, "May I come in? This place is frigid. Tonight there will be another storm." Faye knocked softly on the door and whispered, "I have to tell you something. I am aware of your true desires." All at once, the voices died away, leaving only a ragged breathing. She said I had a baby brother. Christopher was his name. He came in at number 5. The breathing stopped. Faye rapped on the door once more. Something knocked back after a minute. "Now I remember," she added. "For years I was unable to recall, or perhaps I didn't wish to. I find it easier to act as though nothing occurred. Some children create stuff, places, monsters, and friends. However, I eliminated Christopher. In this manner, I avoided losing him. His death was merely fictitious." Through the door came a slow, lengthy scratching sound. Like it was sketching a painting, the object outside was dragging a claw across the wood. Feeling the faint vibrations of the scratching, Faye placed her palm on the door. The number was all I could recall for a while. My entire body ached every time I thought about it, even though I knew it signified something more. I would be ill. After that, I would simply nod out. Or I would simply wake up if I was dreaming. It always had a deeper meaning for me. A clunking, moist sound came from the door as the knob rattled. From the opposite side, the imposter was chewing on it. Our living room was filled with the grotesque symphony of 100 sharp teeth clattering. He was born still on. Are you familiar with that? He passed away within my mother. I have managed to avoid burying Christopher all these time. However, you finally made it clear to me why it's time for me to bury him. Come hold him, Faye, Becca's voice yelled. I don't understand. When you have him, he falls asleep quite quickly. Caleb, you want her to be your new mother? The sounds of scratching continued. In the night, a symphony of voices could be heard. Greg, Laura, Becca, Tiwi, Nathan, and the ranger all spoke at once as a baby screamed and a toddler wept. Words of agony and heartbreaking cries drowned out all other sounds in the room as decades of suffering swept through the door. Faye stood still at the threshold, looking up into my eyes as Angela, the hypnotist, and I exchanged frightened looks. She didn't flinch. The door began to pound violently as the knocking increased. The thing employed every trick in the book. It attempted to rip open the oldest scars and strike her just where the wounds were new. Faye, however, did not waver. She never took her eyes off of me and emotionally defended herself. They seemed to say, "Enough," with a knowing calmness. The imposter stomped from the front door to the window nearby when it received no reaction. It loomed over us, blotting out the moonlight that illuminated the curtains. Faye sat motionless as a massive shadow fell on her. It muttered, "Wool my, wool my." Faye's lips trembled, but she remained silent. The beast let forth a gigantic scream and slammed its open hand against the glass. Faye remained silent as the noises rocked our house and sent a shockwave of fear through my gut. She didn't flinch at all. The entity then made a statement that caught me off guard. It spoke in a few different voices that I did not recognize, rather than one that we were familiar with. It only said one strained line, but it was spoken in a different dialect for each word. "I walked 1,000 years across the dark to find you." A tiny part of me wanted to scream and flee, but I was so terrified that I was unable to move my legs. The finality and longing of its words were unfathomably melancholy. My nerves completely went out. Another, even less anticipated event occurred at that precise moment. As the shadow moved away from the window, the faint moonlight kissed Faye's face, turning it silver. Somber footsteps stumbled across our yard and disappeared into cricket music. We were alone after a time. We all three glanced down at Faye, who was grinning with relief. She had stopped weeping. The imposter has been gone for a few days. It sold me triple-A do. I'm a naked stole me a do was the soul the Levite sang when it came back once Faye slept all the way through it. I didn't tell her about it. Since that night, my fiancée has been getting good sleep. She hasn't spoken at all, and she hasn't sleepwalked for sure. She hasn't even been tossing and turning as much as she usually does. She feels as though a terrible burden has been removed. On the days that she cries, she Skypes with her mother and sister, cuddles with me, and chats about her early years. They also weep. Though I now understand what she did, I have wept many tears with her and for her loss. Faye only ever dreamed of the number 5, never of Christopher. She forgot about him as a child because she suppressed the grief and memory of his passing. That number ended up being the lockbox where he was concealed. She buried him in that coffin. Additionally, she buried him so far inside of herself that she was unable to recall him in her nightmares. The entity only ever responded to Faye by forcing itself into the nightmares. The entity never really grasped what she was concealing because of this, and for that reason it was never able to fully access her. Faye's lifelong sleep issues were an attempt by her mind to suppress the agony that was welling inside of her, but by talking while she slept, she drew attention to herself in a negative way. After all, if you talk long enough into the abyss, someone will eventually start listening. Someone perceived Faye's suffering as a sign of weakness. It chose her because it perceived those fissures in her heart as a gateway to her soul. My fiancée was a monolithic puzzle box of misery, not because she was an easy target, which is why the imposter got enamored with her, a problem, a worthy foe. As I mentioned at the beginning of these stories, Faye's intelligence is one of my favorite things about her. She sees things differently than I do because of her artistic creativity. By exploring the darkest recesses of her mind, she discovered that the imposter was aware of its ability to pull on her puppet strings. Weapons to use against her were in all those secret locations, to make her weaker, to exhaust her. However, rather of further hiding her secrets, she discovered them and made them public. Faye released a tidal wave of forgotten agony upon herself by bringing Christopher and the number that stood in for him from her subconscious into her conscious thoughts. She also removed the imposter's control over her. Now that she had severed her own puppet strings, the creature had nothing left to cling to. Then it went away. I've also cried for T-Way and Nathan, two of my closest pals. Maybe I will never be able to capture the genuineness of their hearts and the warmth of their personalities. However, I had complete faith in them and don't think they were involved in the vile thing that had been pursuing my fiancée for so long. I shall always bear the pain of their loss, and their deaths are fatal wounds on my heart. I want the pain to serve as a constant reminder. They have given me so much and asked me for nothing in return, asking only that I remember their people's goodness. I'm attempting to keep that pledge by blogging about their sacrifices and generosity. May their souls continue to dwell in the hallowed territory they guarded. Who constructed the dreamcatcher in the trees outside my former house and the one at the cabin may never be known for sure. As of right now, I think they were constructed by various Pikes Peak residents. Some of them wish to defend idiots like me who go to that mountain without knowing its importance to the local Indian population. Maybe others want to hurt them. Perhaps Angela herself constructed one for us. If you can't determine who they're meant to protect, it won't work. There has also been much discussion over Faye's ring, including whether it is cursed and what should be done with it. My fiancée does not currently want to give it up, but she may if anything similar occurs in the future. Despite any tarnish it may have, it is a priceless family heritage and a testament to my dedication. I suppose I'm saying that we still don't know everything, and the bad news is that we might never. There may never be a complete explanation for what happened to us, or the actual nature of the entity, but I think I'll learn more about this awful experience in due time. In a few weeks, we will return to Colorado to visit Faye's parents, show our sincere condolences to T-Way and Nathan's community, and watch the cabin being demolished. Let whatever mysteries it still harbors be buried far beneath the debris and the snows of future decades. No sleep, thank you.